Do I like this news when it comes to VeChain? Well, my opinion is yes, even though nothing I say is financial advice. And what is that? Very recently, Kraken made a post, and they were talking about how VET has been added. Now, it's talking about their planned listings basically because it is added to the roadmap. So when it comes to VET on Kraken, which arguably, if I take a look at Kraken, it's very famous, right? I mean, currently, according to CoinMarketCap, it is number 14 in the world in terms of spot exchanges, at least according to their ranking. So if VET, which is VeChain's primary native token, eventually, to my understanding, does get listed there, I think that is pretty impressive. And I think it's a pretty impressive milestone at the end of the day. Because as to when exactly they're going to be launching this on Kraken, right, when it comes to VET, I have no exact date because it is just on the roadmap. But again, even if I take a look at it on Kraken, there's this section that talks about things that are going to soon be launching on it. And, VeChain's there. Or should I say VET, right? It's primary native token. So when I take a look at something like this, I guess it's something for me to look forward to. I mean, with all that though, right? People like to say, well, VET's not doing the best. Take a look at it as of right now. It's slowed down by a lot. I'm totally aware of that. But first of all, right? Sometimes stuff like this doesn't really impact much about a project if there is, first of all, no altcoin season, and also, second of all, if there is no change in sentiment. Neither of those two things we are seeing as of right now. So even despite all of this, right, VET is still down by quite a significant amount. So we're not talking about something that is doing the best. But even still, despite all that, I think this does set a good tone for, I think, VeChain in 2026. Is this going to be a total game changer for VeChain? No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just one, planned listing, right? But I'm just saying, when it comes to something like VET, I feel like it could hypothetically build the groundwork for it moving forward. Because if I take a look back historically, right, years ago, would Dogecoin and Shiba Inu be as massive as they were back at that 2021, year, right? Had it not had the listings that it had. You know what I mean? Arguably, I don't think so. Because imagine if Dogecoin, Shiba Inu was like only listed in a couple places, it's not that popular. It would be very difficult for it to do what it did back then. So I think stuff like this may not show an immediate impact because if we take a look at it, what did the 2020 listings for Dogecoin or Shiba Inu do for it, right? In the immediate sense? Not really much if we take a look at the charts. You know what I mean? It only happened after, like there was a change in sentiment after we saw that type of movement that year. But before, it didn't really do much. So in my perspective, even though it does not necessarily mean it's going to kind of repeat itself in this sense, I'm not saying that, but at least I've taken a look at some clues historically. And I see sometimes these projects like Cardano, for instance, and its native token called ADA. What did the 2020 listings do for it? You know what I mean? But then we saw what happened in 2021. So when it comes to something like VeChain, this may not affect it immediately, which, a lot of my friends out there like to say, oh, why is this not happening? Or let me rephrase, right? They say, why is nothing happening to something like VeChain? It's still below a billion in terms of market cap. But again, the effects sometimes are not necessarily just immediate like that. So to me, when I take a look at this, I think it is an incremental step moving forward, but it's not necessarily a game-changing step, but I still think it's pretty impressive considering the magnitude of this, of what it could be hypothetically moving forward, and also considering how actually I'm pretty kind of surprised, right? When it comes to a project like VeChain, it's still like hypothetically even having new listings because the thing is, one would assume that it already kind of did it all in the past, right? But it's still, not in some places when it comes to VeChain, despite its massive size, arguably, because, yeah, sure, VeChain, it's not doing the best as of right now, but we have to consider this is not like a project that's like 1,000 ranked or something like that, or like 2,000th ranked. That's not the case. Currently, it's number 64 in the world in terms of market cap in this space, right? So for a project that's top 100, basically, in my perspective, I would have thought that, oh, probably it's already listed in this place, but actually no. So I think that, if anything, kind of showcases that despite VeChain's somewhat mainstream awareness, it hasn't really become so mainstream yet to like a Solana, to like a Cardano, for instance. But besides that point, I'm not necessarily disappointed with that either because I am not in this space to believe in like a top 5 project. That's not my, vibe. That's the way I take a look at it. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. However, when I just take a look at in a totally random make-believe scenario, it doesn't even have to do anything with this. But imagine if something is at like level 4, the journey to level 10 is still pretty far, right? As opposed to if something is already like level 8 or level 7, 10 is not that far away. So when I take a look at something like this, it does give me a vibe where it's not like a micro cap, of course, but it's not like so big either. I'm not looking for a micro cap either because, you know, I just don't really want to look for something like that. For one that kind of makes it, there's like a bunch that don't. So personally for me, I'm more of a fan of a project that kind of has an established sort of following, that has an established sort of presence, but then it's not too massive. But then that's just the way I take a look at it, even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything. However, when I take a look at it as well, when it comes to VeChain, my perspective is that sure, it's not a project that I guess I would automatically assume to be something that is cool or interesting. It's more so of a acquired taste. That's the way to take a look at it because I'm not entering into this space for projects that are focused on supply chain management. That wasn't even in my thought process back then, right? But it is now because it's something that I actually have to learn, kind of understand, kind of look at before I know what it is. But I think that even despite all that, though, I don't mind because I think VeChain primarily being focused on supply chain management, I don't get why that's such a not kind of, I guess, fundamentally useful thing. Because the thing is, supply chain management, it's more so of a market that doesn't really seem to go out of style, right? Some other markets out there, they seem a little bit kind of trend focused, but this one doesn't really seem that way to me. But then inherently, just because it is focused on that niche, I don't think it's ever going to become like hypothetically top 10 or something like that because it doesn't have like the mass market appeal, it seems like to me, because of that niche. But does it really need that anyways? I don't think so. This is my personal perspective. I don't even expect that either. Like, for instance, Bitcoin as of right now is over 3 times lower than 300 grand, right? But 300 grand is a point it's never reached before in history, ever. We'll see what happens during this cycle, but it hasn't reached that ever, in my perspective. But when it comes to something like VET, I mean, of course, it's never reached the heights Bitcoin has had reached, right? And I don't think hypothetically it ever would, but I'm just saying, when it comes to VET, in terms of market cap, right, it is actually over 5 times lower currently when compared to a point that it reached just around a year ago. So the thing is, VET is over 5 times lower than a point it's already reached before. And we're not talking about 2021, even though actually at that point we're over 5 times lower than that. But also, if we take a look at it a little bit closer, right, in December, VET is over 5 times lower than where it was in terms of market cap. I'm talking about December 2024. So the thing is, again, it's over 5 times lower than a point it's already reached historically just around a year ago. Whereas Bitcoin is not over 5 times lower than where it ever was historically. You know what I mean? Bitcoin has never reached like 400 grand, 500 grand. You know what I mean? So the thing is, when I take a look at something like VeChain, I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but this is just kind of my perception when it comes to this. But, to me, when it comes to VET, it's not like it's doing the best really, but at this point, the market cap is around like 2020 levels. You know what I mean? In 2020, I did see VET at around $1 billion in market cap. It's literally at that point again. You know what I mean? And it's actually slightly below $1 billion in terms of market cap, which we also did see in 2020. But I'm saying, if I was to somehow go back in a make-believe hypothetical scenario to 2021 in May, and I saw a market cap of nearly 14 billion, and I saw how back in 2020, like basically months before that the market cap was around $1 billion, at that point, I would have probably been like, wow, could I go back a little bit further maybe to that point? You know what I mean? But this is just my perspective, right? But the thing is, it's actually at a 2020 level in terms of market cap right now, right? In 2025, actually entering into 2026. This is just my perception. So if my kind of hypothetical objective is to do something called dollar cost averaging, right? This is not a scenario in which I would be complaining because if I can dollar cost average into a project in 2025, basically, at 2020 levels, I don't know why that would be such a major complaint for me. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but this is just my perception. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to VeChain. I just wanted to make this updated video. However, I hope you all have a very happy New Year's. And of course, depending on when you watch this. However, I hope you all have a very nice day and just a fantastic day overall. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll see you all in the next video.